Hello, I'm Andrew Susskind, and I'm a psychotherapist and author based on the west side of Los Angeles since 1992, specializing in trauma and addictive compulsive behaviors. Welcome to my podcast, named after my recent book and workbook, It's Not About the Sex. Here we have direct and honest conversations related to compulsive sexual behavior and trauma, all from a sexual health perspective. Our intention is to offer fresh viewpoints and practical strategies toward establishing greater intimacy and a more deeply connected life. Let's begin. Mellissa McCracken is a trauma-informed substance abuse counselor currently working at Breathe Life Healing Center as a chemsex program manager. She is a seasoned chemsex counselor and has helped develop a treatment track specific to the needs of those in the LGBTQIA+ community. Mellissa utilizes an experientially based, sex-positive, gay-affirmative approach to recovery from addictive compulsive sexual behaviors. Mellissa strives to bring experience, expertise, compassion, and clarity to the counseling process in order to maximize outcomes and provide genuine healing and wholeness to the individuals she counsels. I'm so pleased to have Mellissa McCracken here with us today. And Mellissa also goes by Mel. So if you hear me referencing Mel, it's the same person. So welcome to the podcast once again, Mel.
Thank you so much for having me back.
I am thrilled to have you with us, and I'm thrilled to have you with us talking about this particular topic because I think it's a topic that a lot of people do not understand. And what that topic is consensual non-monogamy.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of people have ideas about what it is, but I'm wondering if you can start us off and let us know what consensual non-monogamy really means.
Sure. When I think of the idea of consensual non-monogamy, I consider relationships kind of to be agreements with one another, right? Some are romantic agreements, some are sexual agreements, and some are exclusive to one partner, commonly referred to as monogamy. And then there's other types that agree on varying levels of romantic or sexual openness with maybe one or more than one partner, right? And it goes under the umbrella term of ethical non-monogamy. However, in the poly community, it's moving towards consensual non-monogamy, right? So it's just really giving explicit consent to engage in romantic, intimate, or sexual relationships with one or multiple people. Something that I think comes up a lot in talking about consensual non-monogamy is like, well, isn't that just cheating? And I say, no, it's not, because there's consent given and everyone is agreed to rules or definitions or boundaries around their relationship. But cheating still can happen in consensual non-monogamy, even if I've given consent to engage in an open relationship or I'm polyamorous and I'm going outside of my agreements, that is actually considered cheating. So there are definitions and there are agreements and there are very clear boundaries.
So is consensual non-monogamy, which is in itself a tongue twister sometimes, is consensual non-monogamy the same as an open relationship or polyamory?
Well, I think with consensual non-monogamy, right, an open relationship style is definitely a facet of the, I'm going to abbreviate to C&M term, right? And an open relationship style typically refers to a monogamous couple that may have agreed to open up their relationship to include other sexual partners and kind of preserving the emotional intimacy or romantic aspects of the relationship for their primary partner. Being polyamorous refers to someone who may have multiple partners that are fulfilling different partner needs or roles. It literally translates to many loves, right? It describes affectional or relational orientations, some kinship systems that may or may not include romance, may or may not include sex. It's kind of a love style. And I want to say, like, I think we're technically all kind of poly people. We all have many loves, right? And we all have agreements in our friendships and in our partnerships, in our romantic relationships. So we're all kind of living a polyamorous lifestyle, but maybe some of us choose to have sexual exclusivity with just a primary partner. If I have children, and I have 3 children, I have so much love for all of my 3 kids, right?
Right.
And I love them all differently. And I sometimes I think that culturally we're taught that love is limited. And maybe we operate from this place of scarcity or lack or not enoughness, and not from abundance or limitlessness, especially when it comes to romance or sexual love. We kind of operate from this place of not enoughness. But I think polyamorous folks really operate from a space of abundance and limitlessness to loving another human.
Sure.
So they're not quite the same.
Right, right. But they're close cousins in a
They
way.
are close cousins, yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question about monogamy for a moment. So it seems like traditionally monogamy is often seen as the gold standard,
Yes.
that's the way maybe our culture, I can't speak for all cultures, but our society here in the States. And so there's a question, I believe, around the idea that is monogamy truly the gold standard, or has that been historically kind of given to us or taught to us as maybe the right thing to do somehow, as if there's a right or wrong?
Yeah. I mean, it is transmitted, I mean, from a very early age. If you look at any Disney movie, for instance,
Right.
I mean, right there, like, it's very cis, heteronormative, and, mononormative, that like princess meets prince and they live happily ever after. And there's never any problems or any challenges within that relationship if you meet the one. I think that is something that has been passed down in America, right? For a very, very long time. There are other cultures out there who believe in like community living and community love. And that's how they kind of base their relationships. But for us, we're kind of fed this idea of monogamy being the gold standard, monogamy being the goal. And if I'm not in an exclusive relationship, therefore I'm unlovable or unsafe, or, there's a lot of different ideas that really come with monogamy. And for some people that works, and that's fantastic. And I'm so happy that you're in that. And for other people, being poly or being in an open relationship may be something that works. But monogamy is kind of spoon fed, from Beauty and the Beast all the way up.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Maybe even back to Lady and the Tramp or
Yeah, right. I mean, we're like
way back.
just dialing it all the way back.
Exactly. So I think what is so vital about this conversation is that we're going to be talking about how this all fits into the sexual recovery community, meaning those in recovery from sexual compulsivity. And so, can people who are in sexual recovery pursue CNM relationships? Or is that an excuse somehow to act out compulsively with multiple partners?
Right. I think it's a combination of both. For some folks, they use it as an excuse to kind of act out compulsively with various different partners. And I think you can actually pursue a CNM relationship if that's something that you feel like you identify with or that might work for you as a relational style. When I think of people who struggle with sexual compulsion, there's a lot of different facets to this, right? Dishonesty, mistrust, fear, manipulation, coercion. Like these are opposite of what it means to be in a consensual non-monogamous relationship. Because those only work with like trust, openness, honesty, transparency, and people who are in an addictive cycle, most likely are going to be missing either one or all of those requirements to be in a consensually open relationship. I don't think people who are active in like sexual compulsivity are good candidates for open or poly relationship, right? You have to have a solid foundation in recovery that's, definitely built on establishing trust with another human being, being open about what you're up to, being transparent, living through honesty, and really having strong communication skills, right? Like being able to talk about things openly with a partner or with many partners, and not hide or be secretive or dishonest about any of those behaviors. Trust and honesty are like, the top two tenets of consensual non-monogamy. And if I'm active in compulsive behaviors, then I'm definitely not going to be aligned with some of the tenets of CNM.
Sure. So say more about someone who has been in recovery for many years and who has that foundation underneath them. How would you speak to them if they were exploring what CNM was to them?
I think that's a really good question. And I think the first thing I would want to ask is, like, what does commitment mean to you? Like, what does it mean to be committed? Right. And if you're in a place of knowing yourself, you've done a lot of work around building esteem, not relying on validation from others, and building your own self-confidence. I think those conversations really are going to begin with, one, probably someone who can help you along the way. And then two, even introducing this idea into a partnership would be, you have to move with appreciation for the partnership, reassurance, affirming how important the relationship is to you. I think those aspects are really great places to start a conversation. And if it's new territory for you, listen, there's going to be some ups and downs, right? There might be some hurt feelings that you might need to learn how to listen to your partner a little bit more about what feels reassuring for them around the relationship. Because even beginning the conversation, you really want to establish, if you're in a partnership, that the relationship is not being threatened, right? Because that's when people kind of go into activation or fight or flight, is when they feel like their relationship might be threatened. So long conversations, heart, like attunement, like just really opening up a heart space and expressing delight or how important a primary relationship may be. And if you're operating from a place of solo polyamory and you want to have multiple partners, and your reliance is on the self, not on the other people. I'm not relying on this person to provide me a sense of self-worth. I'm not relying on this person to validate me as a human being. I'm not getting my value from anywhere else but on the inside. And I'm still honest and transparent with my partners on the outside.
So I'm hearing a few things. I believe what you're sharing, which is so important for our listeners to understand, is that it really takes a lot of soul searching individually and as a couple to have these truly open, honest conversations and to share from the heart what one's wants and desires truly are, and to be able to really listen to one another, to really try and reach some kind of deeper mutual understanding, which doesn't imply agreement necessarily, but initially some deeper mutual understanding. But I think it's interesting because, having been in programs since the mid-90s, I never heard these words back then. I'm dating myself, but consensual non-monogamy, polyamory were not in the language back then. And exclusivity and monogamy were really what we were spoon-fed, I believe.
Right.
Not in a necessarily malicious way, but it was just the norm of the time. And what I hear you saying is you're opening up the aperture and saying, what else can we talk about so that you don't limit yourself? Because really, this is a sexual health conversation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I love what you said about not limiting yourself. And listen, I'm a person in recovery, and sometimes in recovery programs, there is this old idea of rigidity around relationships. And if you're not in a monogamous relationship, especially in sexual recovery, then you're not in recovery. right? Or
Right.
you're, you know what I mean?
You're
So
not
there's
doing
this
it right.
yeah, there's this idea that kind of boxes people in,
Yeah.
which, I mean, maybe I'm a person that identifies as a polyamorous person, and I'm also in sexual recovery, and I might walk into a room and see
Mhm.
that I have to be either in a relationship or following a strict dating plan. Maybe that doesn't work for me. I really think shining a light on so many different relationship styles is really important, especially for those out there that might feel that way.
Right. And you just teed off the next question about relationship styles. So great. What are some of the most common relationship styles within consensual non-monogamy?
Right. So, I mean, the most common is definitely like an open relationship,
Okay.
right? Which is I am in a monogamous committed relationship, but maybe I say we can sleep with other people, right? And this is where this is a pitfall that I see actually in the population that I work with a lot
Hmm. Hmm.
is people may be in a monogamous relationship and they've decided to open it up, and you and your partner are able to sleep with other people and it's consensual, but there's no boundaries around that and it hasn't been defined,
Hmm.
right? So it's like we haven't discussed the who, what, when, where's, and whys of it. Like, how am I meeting people? Where is it appropriate to meet people? Can I bring someone home? Can I not bring someone home? And then what I will see is like, oh, you were off on a business trip. I brought someone over to our home. And because that hasn't kind of been discussed, there's really no agreement on the openness of our relationship.
Hmm.
Aware of it, I might feel hurt, right? Because I
Hmm.
didn't want anybody in my home.
Right.
So that's one of the more common pitfalls I would see. But open relationships, especially when there's agreements around it,
Hmm.
are one of the top. Monogamish, I love this one. And Savage, right? We hear
Uh-huh.
this a lot. Long-term committed couples who occasionally want to play with others without maintaining the relationship, right? There's no emotional connection, there's no romantic connection. It
Uh-huh.
may be purely for sex, right? But I'm invested in my committed monogamy.
Hmm.
So there's some trust issues around that. But again, like if you're clear about the who, what, where's, and when's of it all, like then it's a lot easier. Swinging is another one. I think about that one
Hmm.
too, right? Couples who play together stay together. I'm sure we've heard that before. So this would be couples who go out and date, or couples who go out and engage in sexual activity with others, right?
Uh-huh.
But not individually.
Hmm.
If we're
Hmm.
swinging, we're doing it together. We're not doing it solo. If we're
Hmm.
open, we may be doing it solo. So,
Got it.
and those are some of the most common, and then poly as well.
Sure. Sure.
Mhm.
So you mentioned jealousy, I think, and
Mm.
that's always a question that pops up around this whole arena. So what about the jealousy factor?
Jealousy is going to come up, especially if you're looking into opening a relationship or engaging any sort of polyamory lifestyle, right? And jealousy, I like to just really define that for a second, especially when we're talking about sexual or romantic relationships. It's a threat to connection. Like it's rooted in fear. Like I'm
Hmm.
scared you're going to leave me. I'm scared you're going to abandon me. I'm scared you might reject me if you find somebody new. And
Hmm.
I think in dealing with jealousy, of course, like that's the internal regulation that starts
Hmm.
first. Like I see you talking to another person, jealousy pops up, and I'm able to kind of regulate my own sense of jealousy
Hmm.
and kind of calm my own fear, and then maybe talk to you about it later. And it might look like I need more reassurance from you. Or there might be an unmet need, like, hey, you said you were going to save this time for me, and then you made a coffee date with somebody else, right? So I
Hmm.
may need maybe more attention or assurance, or maybe we need to revisit our agreement if it's something that continuously comes up. But
Hmm.
the jealousy factor will be in there. Jealousy is a natural human emotion. Every
Hmm.
animal on the planet feels jealousy. So we've all experienced that at one point or another. It is going to be more common though when you are in a CNM relationship. So
Hmm.
removing external triggers, defining your relationship, revisiting definitions around the relationship as jealousy pops up, right? If I'm continuously triggered, a CNM relationship may not be for me. It's all around fear. It's all rooted in fear.
Yeah. I
Go ahead.
would even go as far as saying that it's rooted in terror sometimes,
Some people
depending on one's background and possible traumas, et cetera, mostly developmental or relational. But yes, I couldn't agree more. I was also thinking as you were talking that jealousy can be addressed from various angles. It can be worked on individually, it can be worked on in the couple, or it
Mhm.
can be worked on in both. I mean, what do you think, Mel?
The best way to approach that is definitely both, right?
Yeah.
Like, and talk about it. Be
Hmm.
open about it. Don't try and
Yeah,
hide it. If you feel jealous and you're hiding it, you're kind of pushing it down, that's only going to increase the threat, the fear, the terror. But hopefully, if you're considering a CNM relationship, and if you are in a partnership, you are already kind of standing in a truth and a connection with your partner that you would feel safe enough to tell them, hey, I experienced jealousy when I saw you pick up the phone or talk to this person. But trust is the main line of all of this, right?
for sure.
Having established trust, and
Hmm.
with trust, I'm able to talk about the hard stuff like jealousy.
Hmm. Sure.
So I say both on that one, individually
Yeah.
and together. Yeah.
Yes. The more the better.
Yes, please bring it all.
So if someone wants to begin to talk to their partner about open relationship styles, how would you advise them?
Slowly, do it slowly, right?
Mhm.
Maybe just, you don't want to really drop hints. Do you know what I mean? Because that actually might create a heightened sense of arousal in another
Mhm.
person, like, oh, they're gonna leave me. So
Mhm.
I think actually maybe sitting down and having some light conversations about, like, hey, I was reading this book, Polysecure is one of my uh, favorite books to read about CNM relationships, but
Mm.
and it sparked interest in me. Like, is this something you've ever considered, or would you like to read a little bit of it with me? But going in lightly with the conversation, before any sort of boundaries or definitions around it. You don't want to just jump into, like, oh yeah, we can be open now.
Mhm.
Discussing like terms of what that
Sure.
means and like how I would feel about certain things, and really being very open and communicative,
Mhm.
not rushing it.
Sure. Is there a certain clarity that someone might require within themselves before they bring it to their partner? Or do they just start to talk about it as they learn?
Well, again, I'm gonna go back to, trust in the relationship. And as I'm learning about something, I don't know about you, I read a good book and I want to go tell my person about it. I'm like, oh my God, read this paragraph, right?
Mhm.
So I think it can be a path that people maybe walk in their togetherness. And if we're slowly starting conversations, and I want to share things that are of interest to me with my person. So I think if the relationship is safe enough and you are committed to the relationship, I don't think there's anything you can't talk about.
Mhm. That's beautiful. And I wonder if you're referring to doing that at home on their own or in a therapist or a counselor's office.
I think bringing things like this up, um, there's a lot of fear that comes with it. So maybe having another person there to kind of mediate the conversation, especially if someone is in a lot of fear about how their partner may react, or hurting their feelings, or a rupture in trust. I think it might be a good idea to do it with another person present. Um,
Mhm.
but if you are pretty secure in your own identification, and you have maybe a good partnership in which you can communicate with them, I think you probably could do it at home. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Depends on the relationship. I mean,
Sure.
it really does.
Yeah, it's such tender material and I really see it as an opportunity for closeness.
Mhm.
And sometimes inevitably there will be hurt and disappointment and ruptures, but ultimately I think there's something very exciting in a way in terms of the honesty and the potential to really be fully oneself.
Right. And this is a deeper level of intimacy, right? There's a lot of exposure that comes with what you just said,
Yeah.
and inviting my partner or partners into that space of intimacy and
Right.
deepening our connection in this way of vulnerability
Mhm.
only increases our bond. It doesn't decrease the bond. It
That's
increases
right.
the bond.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mel, you mentioned boundaries and definitions before. Can you talk a little bit more at length about what you mean by that?
Yeah, boundaries and definitions are so important, right? And it's not just like the who, what, when, where's. It's like physical limitations. Like if I am a poly person and I have relationships with 7 people, I might be a little exhausted at the end of a week. So it's really like, what are your limitations?
Mhm.
And being explicit about those with your partner, with
Mhm.
your partners, and also like what's okay and what's not okay, right? If I have an agreement, I'm going to bring this up, although I definitely have feelings about it. A lot of folks have this one penis policy, like where you can do anything else with another person as long as there's not penetration, right? Which is kind of like
Mm.
in this hierarchy power dynamic, like telling me what to do with my body, like no body autonomy, right?
Sure.
So one of your physical limitations might be my body is mine, right? And
Mm.
what I choose to
Mhm.
do with that is not going to be dictated by you. There,
Mhm.
and there's emotional limitations, like how much can I tolerate, even going back to jealousy. Like
Mhm.
if jealousy is something that's intolerable for me, I need to know my own limitations within myself
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
not exceed those just to please you. And
Right.
I see a lot of partners do that actually, is
Mm.
go past their own line emotionally and then not be able to manage the flood that's happening. And then there's usually a rupture, right? There's a rupture
Mhm.
of trust
Mhm.
in the relationship, but that's because I've gone past my point of comfortable.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then safety, right? Sexual health. Like how are we checking in on sexual safety? Regular
Mhm.
STI checks, like all of those things.
Mhm.
Uh, important. Boundaries around who to tell.
Mhm.
Who are we telling that we're in an open relationship? Who am I telling that I am polyamorous? Like, because there are a lot of ideas and there's a lot of stigma around it. If monogamy is the gold star in the culture and I'm outside it on the edges here, then there might be some ridicule or there might be some judgment from other people. So
Mhm.
really defining who you want to tell, who is trustworthy, and also who not to see, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm not going
Mhm.
to see my partner's best friend. That seems
Right.
appropriate, right? Like who are we not seeing? Who is off the
Mhm.
table? I'm not going to see your boss at work. No, I'm not going to see my ex, right? Because there's probably an emotional connection there. And if
Mhm.
we open a relationship that's just around sex or sexuality, going to exes is usually problematic. So
Mhm.
deal breakers, call them deal breakers.
For sure.
Yeah.
As you were talking about limitations, the word capacity kept on popping in for me, that
Mhm.
we're talking about limitations and definitions and boundaries, but we're also talking about our own capacity and how sometimes it grows
Mhm.
as part of the exploration.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think like revisiting this, especially with your partner or partners, is really important because, like you
Mhm.
said, my emotional limitations actually may expand or they may contract. And it's just revisiting all of these things to make sure we're kind of on the same page with one another. Yeah, I love that you said that.
Again, if somebody was asking you this question, so how do I manage relationships once I've opened up
Mhm.
and engaged in a poly practice?
Mhm. You know, 2 things. One, I want to bring in the idea of between care, right? In the kink community, aftercare is a big thing. I'm tending to someone, I'm checking in with someone, I'm attuning to someone. And that is like, after the scene and after the session, right? There's aftercare. And I
Mm,
think once you've opened up a relationship or you're engaged in polyamory, it's going to be about between care. Like
mm,
at first you may need a weekly check-in, a daily check-in with another
mhm,
person, and then that may grow too, and then it's a monthly check-in. But I love to use Janet Fern's model of hearts, right, to check in. It's like you have a date, you have a time. This is where our relationship conversation takes place on Sundays at 5 p.m., right?
mhm,
And on that Sunday at 5 p.m., I'm here, I'm present. I'm fully giving you my attention. There are no distractions. My phone is put away. There's eye contact. I'm listening. I'm being empathetic, right? And I'm really tuned in to maybe what my partner needs to share with me. And that's the H, is just being here and present. The E is expressing delight. What do you love about the relationship? What do you love about the person? What was so awesome when you made me coffee on Tuesday when I was running late? Like really bringing in the delightful, appreciative side of the relationship. A, attunement. We're attuning to one another, right? This is our emotional bond, especially if I'm talking about my primary person. I really want to attune to their emotional needs, right? And just listening, not trying to jump in or problem solve, just really showing genuine interest
Right.
in what the person is saying, right? And that goes across the board in partnership, friendships, romantic relationships. And then rituals and routines, that's the R. This is our time. Like we go to see a movie every Wednesday night. We have dinner every Friday night, and being sure to be consistent and reliable in those rituals and routines, no matter, if I have a new partner that maybe I want to go out with, I'm still adhering to our rituals and routines because that's our time. That's specific to us. That's sacred, and really honoring that. And reliability and consistency are some of the building blocks of trust. And then turning towards each other during conflict is the T. John Gottman, right? Love the Gottman Institute. If there are problems, we can turn towards each other and we can talk about it, and we're able to repair and resolve conflict. If you are considering polyamory, if you are considering a consensually non-monogamous relationship and you don't have conflict resolution skills and you turn away from your partnerships when that happens, that's going to rupture trust. Just turning towards each other. And then, the S of it all is just being secure in you and doing things to build your self-esteem, doing things to build your self-confidence, like engaging in your own therapeutic practices or, program practices, whatever that may look like. Just continuing to build your own intimate relationship with yourself, right? Cultivating self-intimacy. And that's going to kind of help mitigate a reliance on another person, right? Because you're building your own internal esteem and you're not relying on others' esteem.
Sure.
Yeah. So I love
great.
that. It's great.
Beautiful.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
And is that part of a book? Because I was just going to ask you, do you have any good book recommendations?
Oh, absolutely. I love Polysecure, which is Janet Fern's first book. And it really goes, the beginning of the book is really on attachment theory and how we attach to one another in relationships. And then more towards the end of the book, we're really looking into, boundaries, definitions, agreements, and how to be more present in our relationships and how to continue to build intimacy through, consensual non-monogamy. So Polysecure is one of my favorites.
How do you spell the author's last name?
Fern, Fern.
Oh, just like the plant.
It's like the plant, yes.
Cool. Okay.
My favorite plants too.
Polysecure by Fern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
And the ethical slut, right? That's kind of an OG. When we were back with using the term ethical non-monogamy. But that also is a fantastic dive into open relationships, swinging, polyamory. Totally recommend that one. And, Janet Fern actually just came up with her sophomore book, Polywise, which goes more into relational theory, uses a lot of John Gottman to help continue to define open or consensually non-monogamous relationships. Yeah.
So she's really on the growing edge.
She's definitely on the edge of that.
Beautiful.
But I would say the ethical slut kind of opened up the doors.
Okay.
Yeah, for people to begin exploring different relationship types.
Excellent. So based on our talk today, because we do need to wind down in a moment, but I'm wondering if there was maybe one or two things that you would really like our listeners to take with them.
If this is something maybe that you're drawn to or you have interest in, be very slow in your process of inquiry. Move through it slowly. Don't be like, this is it, and jump into it, especially if you're in a partnership. Gather all the information, read all the books, really do an honest self-appraisal, especially if you're in sexual recovery. Am I doing this as a part of my compulsive system? This feels attractive to that part of me? Or am I really actually drawn to this because I admire, appreciate, and desire multiple relationships in my life? So just honest, accurate self-appraisal and trust, understand trust, you can understand multiple relationships. So I guess those are probably the couple of things I'd want people to explore.
This has been so helpful because we actually haven't talked at all about this topic. I think maybe it got touched on by a few people, but this is the first time we spent a complete episode. And I don't know if you know, but we just passed 100 podcast episodes. And the thing I want to say is that you're a breath of fresh air, and it's so helpful because I think there is so much misunderstanding out there, and you were so clear and direct about how people can learn about this whole area of themselves. So I so appreciate you being here, and I may have to invite you back again.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to be here and to talk about stuff that I'm just incredibly passionate about. Like, relationships are the foundation of being a human being. And so I think when we have deep conversations around them, it really just ignites something in my heart. So thank you for having me back.
My pleasure. Take good care, Mel.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. It was so wonderful sharing the time with my colleague and friend, Mel McCracken, and discussing this really significant topic of consensual non-monogamy. If you're so inclined, please give us a 5-star rating and be sure to subscribe and share my podcast with those who may benefit. I look forward to you joining us the next time, and don't forget to stay connected.